We're back at long last. It's Security Weekly News, episode 125. We got Hillbilly Cannibal Weekend, Siloscape, Amazon is listening, the FBI and the DHS got their eyes on you, Apple announcements, and Jason Wood on this edition of the Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. With the skills gap increasing, it's more important than ever to train your staff effectively and efficiently. Offensive Security provides training for your organization designed by the same minds behind Kali Linux. Here are two recent offerings from OffSec. OffSec Academy gives you the chance to earn industry-leading OSCP certification with dedicated one-on-one mentoring. You can also try Proving Grounds Enterprise, created exclusively by Offensive Security's InfoSec experts for highly realistic simulated networks. Visit securityweekly.com/offsec to learn more.
Yay! It's actually June, and it is June, the week of 6 June, and it's hot. So it went from being like winter to being really, really hot really quick. So no fun unless you want it to be hot like my cats do. But we've been back from the holiday week, so we're back. Let's get on to the news then. My breaking news story today, this popped up this morning. I had already put a bunch of stories together, and there was a giant internet outage. I was like, well, that's kind of news. So Fastly, which is a San Francisco-based company, and they're an edge cloud provider, essentially is what Fastly does. And so what that means, if you are unfamiliar with such thing, is they sort of provide a forwarding service for people that want to go to your website to go to a physically closer website. And a lot of people use them. This company's valued at like $5 billion, literally. And so they have a large number, including Amazon, the BBC, Pinterest, Instagram, you name it. Everybody uses this service because you want to get your viewers to your site quicker and more reliably. So basically what happened was, we don't know. Initially, the stories that were coming out, this happened at about 6 a.m. Eastern time. So basically what happened was the first story I saw said, there was this huge outage. They listed a bunch of companies. The second breaking story I saw said huge outage, possible malware outbreak attack, because they obviously were guessing, and they were apparently wrong. So Fastly later said that this was a configuration issue. So they have not said what kind of configuration. Is it DNS? Is it some kind of forwarding thing? Is it a routing table? You don't really know. But as we all know, when you're dealing with production networks, things can get a little squirrely. When you're dealing with production networks of this size, things can get a whole lot squirrely. So I'm sure more will be forthcoming about that story. But for now, basically, it's we don't know. But I wanted to let you in on it as well. So an escape story. I always like these. Malware, which is called Siloscape, was found by Unit 42 in March, and Unit 42 Palo Alto stuff, and has apparently been up and running for about a year. So this particular malware, and the reason it's interesting, is it targets Windows containers that are housed in Kubernetes clusters. And that is a pretty interesting thing. And not just does it target them, this malware is going to try to break out of the Kubernetes node and get into the whole cluster. So the malware basically takes advantage of configuration problems in containers, which allows it to execute its own malicious containers, which are then used to install, more containers that contain malware. Particularly, it installs Trojans and other things into your Kubernetes cluster. And what that does is, of course, allow essentially them to effectively break out of a particular container and get loose. It is a framework, as is most modern malware, and it may very rapidly evolve. So this wasn't actually in the story, but I'm sort of extrapolating here from what we know about all other modern malware. Most malware now are being developed as malware as a service or a customized delivery system. The command and control server is a .onion domain, and Dan, who found it, says he compromised that server. So he claims he actually went into the server, and there were 23 Siloscape victims when he was on the server, and there were 313 active users. So his presumption was that this is something that was being test bedded to be used on a larger scale. The malware uses web server containers in particular is what it's targeting, and it uses known vulnerabilities, so +1 days. And basically, then it attempts to exploit Windows. It escapes the container and tries to start spreading itself through the whole cluster with the credentials of the compromised node. So it captures that and then starts spreading. A lot of this, I don't have all the details on, but there are a lot of details in the article if you want to read about it. It finally, once it's done all that, it connects to the command and control server using IRC over Tor, and it awaits instructions, which basically means it's a framework. So you could have it, install ransomware, but you could also have it install botnets or anything else that you wanted it to do. The article does have all the grim details for you to take a look at. As of today, so this was literally as of this morning, some Amazon devices will be sharing Wi-Fi with your friends, businesses, or whomever, any other Wi-Fi networks they can encounter. So they were adding features where the devices themselves then start trying to share their connection as a Wi-Fi signal with other devices that Amazon produces, whether you want it to or not. It does have an opt-out. This is called Amazon Sidewalk, and it had been much maligned and very controversial. But basically what the plan is with this product is eventually, and it was not happening today, but eventually they're going to put all the Echo and Ring devices so that they can basically create their own mesh network. And that's, of course, using some of your bandwidth as a kind of sideband. But it's also allowing them to continue to communicate even if your Wi-Fi is down. So if your neighbor's got a Ring doorbell and you have a Ring doorbell and they're within, talking distance, those two devices can exchange information and they can share Wi-Fi signals. So that means if your neighbor's Wi-Fi goes down, their Ring device may actually be sharing its video with your Wi-Fi through your Ring device. I don't know how I feel about that. But Amazon is calling this a Sidewalk bridge, and it includes Echoes, Ring floodlights, spotlights. It did not say doorbells initially, but probably all of those are going to eventually amp up. The article says that if you want to opt out, you can do so in your account settings for the Ring or Alicia. We all know what that means, apps. But the concerns about this were not totally clear in terms of like how it affected your internal Wi-Fi, but it certainly would allow Amazon to track you. It would allow them to track more activity from your site, and but they're already doing that. I mean, if you've got these devices on your site, they're already tracking everything you do. They're tracking all of it. They got AI looking at the video. I have no doubt about any little bit of that, because they want to know if you took your dog out for a walk, because then they know you've got a dog. And, that's how marketing works. But if you want to stay out of this mesh in the future, I think you're going to have to opt out now. I don't think it's going to matter. I think your only real solution in the long run is going to be to not have these kind of devices, which eventually may not even be possible. I really don't think they're going to allow this kind of opting out for very long. They're going to push these mesh networks down. And, the best solution, if you're really worried about this and you don't want to live in this world of mesh IoT devices, which is coming, you're probably just the best thing you can do is just put like a gong on your front porch, like one of those big ones like they had, in Queen, that they used one time in the whole show, or like Rush always had that big gong up there behind Neil Peart. I know those are dated rock references, but too bad. And you will just have to get rid of all these kind of enabled IoT devices. But, eventually that path just leads to like a cabin in the woods where you don't have any running water, and, there's like pine cones in the outhouse and that kind of stuff. These devices are definitely chipping away at your privacy, but there's not much of your privacy left if you really think about it, and it's getting less all the time. So if you truly, truly, truly want to hang on to that, you're going to have to really hang on. My next story I'm just going to touch on because Jason is going to talk about it. But one of the really interesting things that happened this week was that the FBI went and got the Bitcoins back that Colonial Pipeline paid. So I thought this was a really interesting story. There's been quite a few stories lately about the FBI and the DHS and others basically going after people with different traps. There's another story this week that I did not cover, but about them using an encrypted chat app that they made available to all these bad actors, and the people started using it, and it was actually an FBI site that they could track everything you were talking about. So it was kind of a pretty interesting thing. But I'll let Jason talk about that story during his time with us in a bit. The Department of Homeland Security has issued a security directive to pipeline owners and operators to take steps to improve cybersecurity. Wow. It only took how many years? I mean, these pipelines have been there for a long time. The internet's been there a long time. But finally, the DHS, on the heels of President Joe Biden's executive order requiring a lot of other action, is now going to require, and they can do this, that all cyber attacks be reported, even if they were just potential loss. So they're not giving them that out where, oh, we don't know, maybe not. And they will have to create a cybersecurity plan, appoint a cybersecurity coordinator, and all that has to be done within the next 30 days. Because if you recall from a few weeks ago, we were talking about Joe Biden's executive order. A lot of the stuff in his executive order was very, very like, will be done within 45 days. You know, it was like, wow. Now, how effective any of this stuff will be and how long it will take them to amp up on auditing this and what they'll do if you don't cooperate, because apparently the pipeline industry has been pretty notorious about not cooperating with this kind of modernization. So we'll see. So if you're in the pipeline industry, that's good. The pipeline industry, obviously, which the Colonial attack underscored, is a critical infrastructure. And it has also apparently been pretty reluctant to update, to anything modern. But it seems that this is probably just going to be the first step from the federal government in the United States in extending requirements like this to a lot of other infrastructure that the federal government has some kind of way to manage. That's good news for everybody in our industry, but except, those industries will now have to try to recruit people, and recruiting people in cybersecurity right now is apparently almost as much of a challenge as buying a house in Rhode Island or anywhere else, from what I understand. Apple had a big event on Monday, and I didn't cover everything they announced. They announced a whole pile of stuff, and the article leads you to a lot of other announcements they made if you're interested in such things. They did announce something called iCloud Plus, which is a new feature that they're touting, which supposedly will include private browsing. So this is something other services have had, but this takes Safari to a private browsing service called Private Relay. The new feature will reputedly prevent your information from being collected by third parties while you browse. So that's something a lot of people have been clamoring for. Now, my immediate thought was, well, yeah, everybody except Apple, who then gets all that information all to their own little self. But according to Apple, this will include Apple. So even though they have your data there, they're not going to use it. Promise. Absolutely. I cross my heart and hope to die virtually if I lie, or I get caught. But anyway, the feature is described as a Tor-style anonymous network, although they really kind of described it. They called it a VPN, but it sounded more like a Tor-type setup. But, of course, it's controlled by Apple, so they're going to control the endpoints and everything else. The description, which was anonymous IP, is assigned, traffic is encrypted and forwarded to an endpoint, etc. Sounds like basic VPN, but according to the article and the Apple description, it does sound a little more anonymous, like Tor, where it's going to bounce it around to a bunch of different nodes, starting from an anonymous point, ending an anonymous point. So the service will not be provided in China, Belarus, Colombia, Egypt, Kazakhstan, the Philippines, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, Turkmenistan, and Uganda, all lovely sounding places that do not allow, cryptography to keep the government from watching what you're doing. Another cool feature they did announce is a hidden email address where you can hide your own email, and they let you create a unique email to use all the time that links back into it that's temporary. So that way you can register all those pesky news sites, and you don't have to give up your thing or create a bunch of fake email accounts like all the rest of us do all the time. Definitely worth keeping an eye on all these as they release all the deeper details, but there were many more announcements at that event yesterday. When we return, the long-awaited return of Jason Woods. So stick around.
As technology continues to evolve and expand, so have the attackers that put our critical systems in jeopardy. Core Impact from Core Security is a penetration testing tool that safely finds vulnerabilities using the same techniques of adversaries, with certified exploits and wizards that guide you through critical pen tests while maximizing the time of advanced testers by automating their routines. With Core Security, you can safeguard your infrastructure by limiting access, detecting threats, testing for security weaknesses, and efficiently monitoring data. Visit securityweekly.com/core security.
Well, welcome back. When he's not cybering, you may find him doing his second favorite thing, the world of naked kiteboarding enthusiasts. These folks spend a lot of time dangling over our beaches and shores and just enjoying nature the way it was meant to be, attached to a giant kite with a snowboard on your feet. It's a high-stakes game, but Jason wouldn't have it any other way. Over to you, Jason.
Well, it's always fun to come back and see what you've been cooking up for introductions. I had no idea who's into naked kiteboarding, but hey, there it is, folks.
When you walk out on that hotel balcony and you get that big aha.
Yeah, you heard it here first. So yeah, like Doug said, both of us jumped on this situation of the FBI taking back the money from the bad guys who stole it from Colonial Pipeline. This was caught both of our attention in a hurry, and kind of not too surprising that it would, I suppose. Obviously, the Colonial Pipeline attack has caused a huge amount of news and waves and stuff like that. As far as just the impact it had to, particularly on the eastern United States, and even the ransomware groups got involved, making public statements about various things and whatnot. And so yesterday's announcement by the U.S. Department of Justice and the FBI was just another fun twist in this ongoing saga. Like I said, we saw the news, or maybe we even felt the impact. We had a good time poking fun at people filling up trash bags and Tupperware totes with gasoline because they were worried that they were going to run out of gas. I think a Hummer even burned at one point for that, one of those maneuvers. But the disruption was huge, and obviously the U.S. government was not amused by this at all. They've started putting in more resources to ransomware. They've been very public about that, hey, we're going to start treating this like terrorism and stuff like that. That's kind of the response here. The U.S. is getting pretty upset about this and aggressive in their response. It turns out that when Colonial was originally attacked and the ransomware was discovered, they very quickly contacted the FBI and said, hey, we've got a problem, as they started working on their response to it. Now, the Department of Justice does not advocate paying out ransoms. They don't want you to do that because that incents the bad guys to do it more. But regardless, it's kind of up to the company or the victim to figure out what they're going to do. And Colonial decided that we're going to go ahead and pay this out. And so they bought 75 Bitcoin, roughly, which at the time was about $5 million US, and sent it over to the attackers. Now, because of this coordination, the FBI was able to track some of this activity here, the transfers that are going on. And lo and behold, as they're monitoring this, they found that most of the coins that were sent to the attackers ended up in a wallet that the FBI had access to. And so they took back 63.7 Bitcoin out of the original 75. So they got most of it back. But this is really kind of interesting here because there are a couple of things that surprised me, and they kind of raced to see which was the most surprising to me. But the first one that I thought it was, wow, I can't believe the FBI was able to respond that aggressively and that quickly. The money hits a wallet, and they decided to go ahead and pull it back out before the Bitcoin gets transferred off to somewhere else. There's a saying about the wheels of justice grinding slowly, but in this case, obviously, they moved rather fast. There must have been a number of approvals that they would have had to get for something like this. I can't think of any other time that I've heard of them just confiscating money like this, at least in this type of situation. So this was really kind of interesting that this happened. And that they got all the approvals to make it occur. At the same level of surprise really was the fact that they had the private keys to the wallet in the first place. Now, I don't think any of us would be surprised that prior to Colonial, the FBI has been investigating these ransomware groups. Doug makes the comments about, well, we never want to talk about ransomware because it happens so much, and then we end up talking about it because it's weird stories, or highly impactful intrusions and things like that. So it happens a lot. But the FBI's investigation led them with enough access that they got in there and they got access to the private keys somehow for at least one big crypto wallet, which, if I was operating one of these groups, I'd be looking at all of my private keys and thinking, okay, maybe we need to make some changes here because I don't know what the FBI has access to. Did they get access to something else? So I'd be really concerned about that. Regardless, this was a huge coup on the part of the FBI to get that level of access. I mean, they must be really pretty deep into this environment, or they got somebody to give them information that surprised me they were able to get. Regardless of all of that, this again just allowed the FBI to just take back what had been stolen. Now, Colonial's obviously really happy about this. They got back most of their money. Well, not most of their money, about half of their money. The value of Bitcoin has dropped quite a bit, so it's now worth about 2.3 million instead of the original 5. Even though we got back the majority of the tokens. So, maybe they'll hang on to it and see if things go up. The fallout on the bad guy side, DarkSide has announced, hey, we're suspending operations. We lost access to our servers. We lost access to our cryptocurrency. We're done. And initially this was taken as we're going to lay low. We didn't mean to quite take down the East Coast gasoline capacity. So we're going to wait until the heat blows off. But this announcement kind of lends some credence to that statement that actually they were pretty well hammered. The FBI appears to have had some deep access to their environment. So it looks like they may be down for permanently, or at least in this incarnation for quite a while. Something related to this that I also thought was interesting. The Revil ransomware group, or Pinchy Spider as we like to call them where I work, because it's fun to say on my part at least. They came out and made a statement back when the Colonial Pipeline attack occurred. Hey, this was really pretty high impact. We're going to provide some additional vetting on targets that our affiliates go after. Make sure we don't hit U.S. customers or victims, excuse me. And then they've kind of turned the page on this. They went after the JBS meat processing company, which is a large company and with plants all over the place. And they said, well, we don't know why the U.S. is upset about this because we took down a Brazilian target in spite of the fact that it shut down plants in the United States. So the United States, again, is not really happy about interfering with things like food supply. And so they're responding aggressively. And Revil's response is, well, fine. If you're going to go after us for not hitting a non-U.S. target, we're just going to declare open season on the United States. So, reversal from their statement last month. Supposedly, they've decided that this is just too harsh at how we're responding to places or intrusions that occurred in another country. But I kind of look at this. There's some hints that indicate that maybe DarkSide and Revil are related to each other. Maybe they're friends or former colleagues or something like that, or maybe they're tied in even a little bit closer. So perhaps they're angry because the FBI took back 63.7 Bitcoin from an intrusion where they stole the money in the first place. So no one likes being ripped off or having their friends ripped off, if that's the case. So even if they are crooks who stole the money in the first place, I don't know. Going forward, are we going to see more Revil ransomware in the United States? Probably. Why not? After all, I mean, they're out here to make money, in spite of some of their claims of altruistic whatever. We're just, I don't know. We're trying to not impact things. We just want money. We don't want to be political, whatever. I think they're going to probably go for it. On our part as defenders, watch out for things like brute force password attacks, require multi-factor authentication, particularly on anything that's hanging out on the internet. Make sure you don't have unknown devices or services like VPN systems hanging out on the internet that you don't know are there that provide access into your environment. IT hygiene is about as unsexy as it gets, but it's still really important. And a lot of the intrusions that I see related to ransomware would have been prevented had somebody been paying a little bit closer attention to their hygiene and stop some of these things early. So, this gets very, very painful when it occurs. So be aware of it. We keep talking about it, but these things keep happening. But maybe we're going to get some more heat. REvil's pretty nasty about how they conduct their operations. So be on the lookout.
Thank you, Jason.
Back over to you, Doug.
Yeah, thank you. It was an interesting thing, and watching the FBI go after these was quite interesting. I'm sure they'll all shift tactics as well, because it's like if their Bitcoins are compromised, they'll do something else. But definitely clean up your act on our end so that you don't get ransomware in the first place. Make sure you got backup somewhere, that fail-safe backup that cannot be accessed. That might be helpful. Maybe not, but you never know. Finally, I could not resist this story. I'm sorry. It grabbed me. So Rob Zombie, who has been described in memes as a microwaved version of Jason Momoa, is making a new movie. And I love Rob Zombie, don't get me wrong. The famed director of Satan's Rejects, The House of 1,000 Corpses, and 31, among other awesome splatter horror movies that are actually kind of funny at the same time, is going to take on a horror classic, The Munsters. Yep. That there was a goofy black and white TV show that you might have watched in reruns. It was on TV. It was before my time. I mean, I was like a little kid when this was on TV. It was still in black and white. They did have some color episodes later, but I think the early ones are all black and white. But Herman, Lily, Grandpa, and poor, old normal cousin Marilyn, not exactly sure what a campy 60s show and Rob Zombie will mix into. It's going to be something like Bad Taste. If you've ever seen that, if you've never seen Bad Taste, you should watch that. Early Peter Jackson splatter movie that's kind of a comedy, or maybe more like John Waters directs Hillbilly Cannibal Weekend. Which I would like to go see. I mean, John, if you're out there, Hillbilly Cannibal Weekend, I can't wait to find out. And that's the news in the time of declining plague. Get your shots anyway. Thanks to Jason Wood for returning. And we'll see you Friday on the Security Weekly News wrap-up show.